Good evening, everyone. I hope you are all well and safe. I'm Zeel Parekh from Team GUSEC, and I would like to welcome you all to today's session, today's certificate workshop that is on getting started with AR, VR, MR technologies with the Chief Technologist and the Global Head of Technovation at Wipro, Mr. Pravin. And I would just like to mention that the certificate workshop is a part of our upcoming Tech Accelerator program, which is Accelerate Bharat. Accelerate Bharat is a 6-week accelerator program, and it aims at providing a nimble and accessible platform for tech based startups who are creating solutions for India in the sectors of healthcare, education, agriculture, financial inclusion, infrastructure and transportation, environment, clean tech, and clean energy solutions, and using technologies like AI, ML, AR, VR, MR, IoT, blockchain, robotics, 3D printing, and UAVs. So, for further details, the program structure and timeline, you can visit our webpage, which is usec.edu.in/ab. And so, without much ado, I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Praveen, who is an innovation leader and has an experience of over 3 decades in the IT industry and is a mentor to many technology led innovation projects. Today, he'll guide us with details on what are these technologies, what is the difference between augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. So he'll take us through this extended realities, and it also help you solve your queries if you have a startup, or if you are studying and are interested in the subject. You can I'd request all the viewers to put your questions in the comment box on whichever social media platform you have joined us through, and we'll keep try and keep the session interactive. But after sir gives us a few, we'll just take questions in parts during the presentation, and the certificate will be shared with you in uh, like in the next week, so on your registered email IDs. And so yes, we'll post the link at the end of the session for the same, so stay tuned, and I would hand over the session to Mr. Praveen, sir.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, everybody. I will share my screen now, and let's get started. Okay, is my screen visible? Okay, so yeah, we can keep it interactive. I don't want to make it a monologue. I've put a few slides together. Uh, lot of the way I've looked at it is one is defining what is AR, VR, XR, uh, and what is the what is the genesis behind it, right? Because uh, the very fact that we are doing this session today uh, reflects the reality that XR today is becoming very, very important from an industry standpoint. We've got a fairly good traction with some very high tech startups in India also, and I'm sure as we go through the session, the intent would be to demystify AR VR XR, to look at what compromises. So what are the ingredients of this technology stack? We'll look at some of the standards and the tools and ecosystem that's getting created out there. And then the last part of it, we'll discuss a few industry use cases, and we'll analyze how this will transform the whole industry landscape. Right now, because uh, I think the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, uh, you've been seeing a lot of memes around where the biggest digital transformation driver in the last 6 months or 8 months has been COVID-19. Right, the whole concept of moving away from a hands-free operations, right? And don't worry about these terminologies. I'm just setting the context and getting us in on the same page before I get started, right? Moving away from a hands-free operations to a human-free operations, and that was a predominant mantra behind which we looked at all technology evolution. And the good part of it is today, if I look at the AR concepts of it or the MR concepts of it, uh, they allow us to get into a a touchless or a human-free environments. And we'll talk about it. We'll see how it goes, what evolves around it, and what are the key areas around it. But I'll touch one or two initial concepts, right? And I'm assuming right now, and I'm going to start with fundamentals right now, right? I will start with basics. I will start with what it takes to create uh, a business or do a startup or build platforms, products, services, or skill sets on AR, VR, and MR, right? But before we get started there, right, there are two big trends we're seeing out there. One is a convergence trend, right? And when I say convergence, uh, there are multiple forms of convergence: industry convergence, technology convergence, and the most critical part, and why AR VR is getting a lot more uh, momentum today, is because of the creative side of convergence happening. So you've got the technical side, you've got all the C++, Javas, .NETs, Pythons, and the technology side of what we need to do from a logical thinking perspective. We've got the creative side of it, which is the gaming tech aspects, right? And today we are seeing convergence of both those aspects coming in. And as we go through, uh, we will address why this convergence is happening now, and we'll also look at how it's going to help us achieve much higher levels of uh, impact or transformation using XR based technologies, right? And let's quickly go through some of the introduction sites. If you look at innovation as a flow itself, it is changing and changing very, very fast, right? If you look at this timeline of 1900 all the way to 2050, right? We've started with 1900 tape recorders to televisions to 1950s color TVs. Uh, sometime in 1980s, we looked at VCRs, into gaming in the early 2000s, and now we're moving towards sensory internet of experiences, digital mirrors, virtual reality windows. So you see the transition happening. I'm focusing only on the XR or associated five human senses aspect of it here. But every decade or every block that you're seeing out here, the density is increasing. The pace of innovation is changing and changing very, very fast, right? And between 1920, which was the earlier pandemic, to 2020, which is the pandemic that we're going through right now, we can see a huge shift in the way technology is uh, getting viewed, getting consumed, or getting developed going forward, right? Very interesting slide. Why we should, and the right time for us to look at technology at the front and not at the back, right? Technology as an enabler is one aspect of it. Now we look at technology, taking a front line and front end activity across each of the spaces out here. Just to get your attention here, right? Now, if you look at fiction to reality, right? 1926, Metropolis had a video phone created, and this movie, and this all, I'm sure many of these movies, Minority Report, and you must have seen, right? In 1920, in 2006, Skype became a reality, right? So if you see the timeline there, it's close to about 80 years from fiction to reality, right? The Voice Command Center, Space Odyssey, created that in 1968, and we saw Siri coming in with a this in 2011, right? Now, if you look at some of the other areas, heads-up display, right? Today, the whole world of VR is built around heads-up display, right? Now, if you look at RoboCop in 1984, we had the head-mounted displays coming up in 2005. You can see the shrink happening there, 84 to 2005. The most interesting part of it is driverless cars, right? Because 2001 Minority Report brought in the concept of driverless cars, and 2011 we were test driving uh, a autonomous car on the technology stack there, right? So very interesting flow if you see the whole fiction to reality part. I'll spend a few more minutes on the whole AR or the XR concepts out here, right? Many of these movies, I'm using movies because when you're looking at creative side of it, that's the best way of looking at creativity part of it, right? Sound control holograms, 2012, right? We had the ubiquitous monitoring and face recognition in Ireland in 2005. Uh, Military robots, portable computing, gesture immersive, both in Minority Report, Matrix Reloaded. You could see each of those uh, fairly well established as concepts out there. So what we're seeing right now is AR, VR, MR, and we'll see that as we go along. The first patent was filed in 1960, right? So the technology itself is not, or the concept behind technology itself is not new, right? But the realization is because of technology evolution, and we'll cover that as we go along. Creativity, with basically imagination, creativity, empathy plus innovation, and driving value creation. Now, if you look at some of these aspects, right? Innovation is a new way of thinking, new way of doing. Uh, in the virtual world, the biggest difference in designing for a virtual world and designing for the physical world is in the way you can empathize with the person in the virtual world, and he can be multiple personas. So whether it's a AR or MR or a VR, uh, the many of us are not familiar with the environment of working in a VR world, right? But the behavior patterns, the reflex actions, the sensory systems definitely work differently in that environment. How do you think for that? How do you plan for that? How do you design for that, right? Uh, it's a continuous process again, right? Every virtual world, and virtual world is a software-defined world, right? If you look at technology trends, if you look at blockchain, software-defined trust, 5G is software-defined connectivity, AR, VR, MR is software-defined experiences, right? And the whole world, if you see digital world, is a software-defined environment itself for you, the digital twin, right? Now, this process of being able to reconfigure a software-defined world has moved in a hardware-defined world. Turnkey projects are 5 years, right? Now, in a software-defined world, we can do a 5 weeks or a 5 months turnkey projects, and fairly complex, fairly comprehensive. And that continuous process of it becomes very, very creative and important out here. Uh, Again, a baseline virtuality continuum is very, very highlighted out here, right? The other two extremes are very clear. Reality, a physical world, physical reality, all of us are familiar with it. Virtual reality is the other extreme of it, where you'll see you being ported into a completely virtual world. There is absolutely no physical entity. Your physical existence itself does not exist. The time, space, all the dimensions of 4D gets transformed there, right? The important ones are the center ones, right? Where you can look at augmented reality, where you can augment uh, in the physical world, right? And you're bringing a virtual uh, data or a virtual parameter onto a physical world and able to share information in that space out there. And we'll go into more details. Obviously, this is not the definition point. And we're looking at the augmented virtuality world, where an example here would be your typical cave-like environments where you're in the virtual world, you're physically present in that world, and you're able to interact, operate, and learn. And the biggest value, some of the value drivers I can talk of XR today is the learning curve between the physical world and the virtual world or augmented virtuality world is about 4 times faster, right? So even in the best case scenario, we're talking about 4 times faster assimilation of information, context, knowledge, skill, experience, and all of those aspects, right? And we'll look at it as we go along. Uh, Again, a baseline context, all about AR, VR, MR is all about human machine interfaces, right? And if you see the most significant and most important stimulus for a human response, sight is 70%, hearing is 20%. So audio centric, augmented reality is getting more popular. Smell, touch, and taste in that format there, right? But the first two will probably drive a lot of what we're going to look at from a AR, VR, MR perspective. And if you can manage the first two well, I think the cognition that can be teleported or that can be holoported can be fairly well established there, right? We've got interfaces on one side, chats, acoustics, gestures, emotions, haptics, smell and taste, which are important from a human machine perspective. The experience is one part of it, one layer of it, which again will translate into different ways of how we use each of these back. And I've just classified them just to keep a different sensory base to it. But eventually, in a typical MR or a AR world, you'll converge all of this into a single footprint, and we'll talk of it as we go along. And new age devices, right? You move from desktops to mobiles to walls to HoloLenses to gamings to head mounted to kiosks to robots to even looking at cave environments today where it's augmented virtuality at a base there, right? So fairly good landscape to think of how the whole space drives, and it's an inherent human behavior that we're talking of here, human sensory systems that we're talking of coming to play out here. Uh, any questions? I'm not seeing the comment window, but if any of you have questions in the way, maybe you can talk to me on the audio itself. If I have to flip to the comments window, I'll have to probably reduce my presentation window, right? But we can. So what is XR right now?
Sir,
Fairly
sorry.
simple. We looked at virtual. It is a head-mounted display. Your 4DL views, your line of sights are fairly constrained right into your eye, and what you see is a complete virtual world, and you don't know where you're standing, right? And
Sir,
where you,
Praveen sir, sorry, but the
yeah.
slide is, it's what is XR. A part of your slide is going behind, like it's cutting. It's not visible to the audience. Can you just check
Uh,
if you can?
okay, it's not clear. It's not visible fully, is it? Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. So there is a 10-15% there is going inside the.
Oh, okay. So should I keep it like this then?
Yes, but sir, that won't be visible to the audience. Can you just try the slideshow again? Yeah, it's good. It's perfect now.
It's fine now. Oh, it is.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So if you see the Consumer Technology Association, this definition of XR I'm talking of is largely from that CTA 2069A, right? It's a general term, and it refers to all of these and more, in fact, right? I'm only talking of virtual, augmented, and mixed. Augmented virtuality and cave and others also will fall into the same brackets out here, right? Uh, in the augmented, it's basically digitally created content in the user's real world, right? In the past, we used to have the Google Glass, and a lot of augmented today happens on smartphones. I'm sure many of you would have seen or are seeing some of those elements out there. RealWare is another example of what is there in that space there. And in the mixed world, you're superimposing digital and physical worlds, and you're able to blend that back. And we'll look at it as we go into more details out here, right? Story of XR, right? We looked at the first patent, we looked at was 1960, right? If you see the early history, 68 onwards to 99, all the way into the HoloLens AR, which was launched in 2016 by Microsoft, right? And then AR Kit in 2017. There were a lot of latest envisioning happening after that, which happened into 19, and then subsequently we'll start seeing as we go into 2020 and 22, as we go into more detail, more maturity of these technology stacks out here, right? But again, the cycle, and I'm going to talk about a few hype cycles as we go along and see how each of those trends evolved and shifted in the process there, right? Uh, fairly comprehensive, and we are at the peak of it. If you look at the whole AR, VR, MR, XR world today, uh, we are at a point of explosion or transformation, right? And we can see many different industries adopting it at different scale at the moment. And in the next 1 to 2 years, we will definitely see a massive uh, shift in the way people are getting accustomed to using AR, VR, MR, and the way we can build, deliver, and operationalize AR, VR, MR at scale, right? And we'll discuss where were the constraints in the last 2, 3, or 4 years, and where we are now, and what's happening now, and why is it shifting right now as we go along, right? A brief video. We're looking at the digital world very differently, but a lot of digital world is actually uh, repositioning of the physical world, right? And I just want to play this briefly, for about a minute for you to get a view. Hope you'll also hear the audio of that. Let me start the video. Okay, I guess the audio was not available, but it's only a music, so that's okay. You've not really missed much of audio, uh, right? So for this video, and it brings out a lot of the way we can see technology changing, right? And we've moved from monolithic to consumer, composable apps in today's world, right? And we probably will, if we get time or go into deep dive into that space, we'll look at observability as a layer, which is important from a AR, VR, MR perspective, because uh, the whole way of looking at the way we see AR, VR, MR is at the edge. It's an empowered edge. All of it happening outside of the core firewall and environments of an industrial landscape, right? And uh, if you want to look at what is observable, or the whole observability aspect of how AR, VR, MR will evolve in the going in the near future, think of it like what you know and what you understand. What we know and what we can understand, we can test. What we don't know but we understand, we can monitor. But there are a lot of elements in AR, VR, MR which we don't know and we don't understand, and that's where the cognitive aspect of what we're talking of, or the virtual aspect of a world that we don't know or we don't live in, will start coming into place, and that's where the observability stacks becomes very important, right? And the modularization, composable aspects of it will drive from there. Now, quick look at it. Virtual reality. 2015 Cardboard was launched. A lot of excitement got created. You had, the whole gesture controls. Uh, you know, the whole system, whole space got mapped fairly differently from 2015 onwards, right? Look at 2016, augmented reality took powerful shape, while VR moved into a slope of enlightenment. We had AR slowly reaching the trough for disillusionment. Right now, here Google Glass, HoloLens, the first versions of it, the developer editions, uh, Euphoria and Unity, all of those started taking shape, and people started playing around with that. They had their own standards, they had their own uh, protocols defined, their own stacks defined, and it was evolving, right? If you see this curve here, right, and it's a fairly interesting view from 2005. Gartner predicted AR to be more than 10 years, and we are standing here in 2020, where AR is not available on the hype cycle at all. So Gartner, believes that it is beyond being tracked on the hype cycle, and it is ready for scale and maturity. Right. That's a good news, and that's why we've seen value out there. Right. Look at 2017. VR went out of the hype cycle, MR entered, and mixed reality became a lot more predominant in the thinking and mapping. You had AR Core, AR Kit, and before you also, sort of getting launched and taking shape out there. 2019, both AR, VR, and MR moved out of the hype cycle, right? And but what came in? If you see 2020, the two new concepts started getting tracked by Gartner. One is multi-experience, and one is human augmentation, right? And that showed that it is moving away from a good to be exciting technology to something that you can start looking at seriously from an industry standpoint, right? And in 2021, if you see Gartner's top 9 trends, they just launched about a couple of weeks back, right? It's all about industrializing XR. They talk of two concepts: Internet of Labor and total experience. Right now, this probably blends AR, VR, MR into the entire uh, technology landscape at an industrial layer, right? And the whole convergence of industry and technology is seen very well. Now, if I look at the IT, OT side of it, right, operations technology and information technology, uh, a lot of the way we look at AR will start driving or blending into the operations technology layers, and we'll see how that evolves as we go along. Any questions so far? I'll quickly look at the chat window if there's anything there, but can I continue? design thinking approach. Okay, BIM technology. Okay, yeah, sure. I'll cover BIM separately. I'll show you something on BIM where there's something called industrial uh, holographics, and there's something called room scale VR that we'll talk of, where BIM is done. And I'll probably show you a brief video of what we can look at from a BIM perspective. Okay, okay, perfect, Lisbon. Now, let me continue then. Okay, a new beginning. I think we spoke of business convergence. Now let's look at enablement standards, right? Now OpenXR as as an application interface, is very prominent today. Well participated by most of the vendors there, whether it's Leap, Oculus, HoloLens. All of them are driving that, and that layer becomes very important because you can today develop uh, content on any platform, and the best part for you would be that you would want your customer to play it on any platform that he chooses or he prefers to, right? If you have a very limited scope for development, you develop a content, it's going to be used only for HoloLens and you can't use it for anything else. It's a very constrained, very restrictive, very low efficient way of delivering, and that is being addressed right now. That OpenXR standards are becoming very important, and we're seeing whether it's the game engine side, the WebXR is again very interesting. We're moving from industrializing to the web-based technologies, which will help us scale it to, you can go to any level of scalability that you can imagine and visualize, right? Looking at it from the standardization of development kits. Screen is getting cut again. Okay. Uh, Hopefully you can see the screen fully again. No?
No,
Oh,
sir. Again, that's going out of the screen.
how come? Yeah, nothing changes for me here. It's still going out of screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then let me continue like this. Hopefully, let me see if I can remove some of the
Sir,
uh,
can you use control plus zero as asked here?
control.
If you can control zero. Perfect now.
Yeah. Okay.
Sir, I also had a question which was given to us previously, which is very basic, but there were multiple people asking that what is the difference between augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, and what is more preferable and why? So that was the one of the questions that was asked multiple times.
Okay, let me address it up front. So if you see the virtual reality world, is a world where you're taken completely into a different world. You're in the virtual world. Let me take an example. Let's say you wear a headgear and you can land up on Mars, right? You don't know where you are. You don't know what's your physical location, your local coordinates, but you're completely in the virtual world and you can navigate in that virtual world. If you've used any VR headsets, like where's Google Cardboard with a smartphone, if you're playing any games in that world, you're teleported completely into that world, and you have no physical correlation with where you are, what you're doing, what you're experiencing in the physical world, right? Now, uh, there are limitations of the VR world, and the technology limitations. There are health considerations. There are risks which are different, and VR world slowly will uh, you know accelerate towards adoption. It is not there yet, and it probably will take a longer time. It initially grew very fast because the gaming industry used VR very well, right?
Right.
Playing games is fine. I can sit on a chair and do something, but in the industrial world, I will probably not be able to do much sitting in one place, right? And there was initially we did look at VR from training for fire and safety, for simulation on oil rigs and some of those environments, right? But they were restrictive. They were constrained in what and how much you can accomplish in terms of learning. That's a VR world for you, completely virtual, right? Now, if I
Right.
take the AR world, I'll give you an example of AR where you're looking at a laptop right now. If you're wearing an AR glass, on the AR glass, I'll get information about the laptop. What make is it?
Okay.
When was it manufactured? Uh, what are the configurations of the laptop? When will it expire in terms of warranty? What is the current utilization levels of the laptop? All of that will be augmented on my glass if I'm wearing an AR glass, and I can interact with the laptop out here, right? A very simple example I'm giving you right now, right?
Right.
And in the MR world, I can actually use MR world. If I'm using a HoloLens, I can actually project a new laptop here. And when I don't have a laptop on my table, I can project a laptop and use my uh, keyboard and my mouse virtuals to be able to maybe operate and interact with the laptop, right? So I'm in the AR world, there's physical world. I'm augmenting information in that physical world and getting some things done onto it. Physical laptop, information about the laptop being augmented onto it in my glass. And in the MR world, I'm actually in the physical world. I'm bringing an entire virtual laptop in place there and able to interact with it. Design collaboration, design engineering are some of the examples that you can look at from a MR world, where I can project a between you and me. If you are in the same space, I can project a car right in front of me, and both of us are seeing and operating on that car, which is virtually projected. I can design the car in terms of aesthetics, in terms of materials, in terms of mechanical parameters, all of that, and I can finalize that as my needs. So predominantly, I think that's the big difference out there. The AR world is taking shape much faster because amount of knowledge augmentation we can do with AR world is much higher, right? And in the MR world is also catching up drastically. Currently, the cost of devices of MR are slightly high, and that will get optimized over the next couple of years. But for industrial side of it, I think it's a fairly powerful tool today. MR will definitely get consumed well at the enterprise levels. And if you're looking at developing technologies, whether it's product services or skills around AR, VR, MR. AR would be primary for low-hanging fruits. MR would be the high margins, high scale over the next 2 to 3 years time frames.
Right. So,
Okay.
yes. So, can I take one more question from the audience, wherein
Sure.
Leap PUBG Gaming, I don't know the person's real name, has posted that what all AR, VR, or XR or mixed features used or implemented in Wipro at Wipro company.
Okay. I will. So we use all three technologies today. In fact, in our labs, we have way beyond that. We've got industrial room scale holographics. We have a cave installed in our labs, in our setups today, right? So we use
Okay.
a fairly comprehensive platform around AR VR. We have a platform called IX, but there's not a sales pitch, so I'll probably not go into details of that. But yes, industry is adopting it drastically. Wipro is way forward in developing some of these technologies and developing solutions around these technology stacks.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'll take up more questions after a while. You can continue with the presentation.
Sure, perfect. So development kits out here. Then again, the web side of it. We looked at the web AR part of it. Right, web XR is a fairly powerful uh, system that we're looking at, and you can actually start doing much more uh, scalable WebGL plus Web OpenXR standards, converging the W3C area that you can look at from a WebXR standpoint. Can transform and will transform a lot of the way we. This probably will be a very minuscule cost from a implementation perspective, and that's why I think uh, the industry is very excited of Web AR and Web XR, right? Because you can really look at it with low band, not low, but easier bandwidth needs and scalability part of it. Development kits itself, sorry, I've covered that. So, okay, these are the enabled side. You've got the hardware. Look at the AS IPS standards for that. You've got the development kits. One example is what we talk about here. There can be many other development kits out there, but the standardization of that becomes very critical. We're bringing all of that together. We've got the enablement from a web standard perspective. So you moved from hardware, which are constrained, restrictive, to platforms which are more fungible across different stacks, and then move to the web world where you're looking at practically uh, large scale alignment and mapping across a space out there, right? Let's look at some adoption aspects right now, right? Look at industrial use cases, and I'll come back to some of the details out here, right? But if you look at every industry out there, right, whether military has been using it for a long time, whether it's aircraft simulation, uh, the whole area around warfare, and any of those defense equipment out there, education has been big. Self-guided interactive learning is becoming more and more important. More and more more than important, it's becoming more and more acceptable in the digital world. If you look at digital natives today, people who are born in 2000 and after, who are now slowly entering the workforce, uh, they were born digital, right? They think digital, they breathe digital, right? For them, you saw that video earlier, right? They, everything is touch, and there should be action out there. There's no concept of non-touch based interfaces for them at all. You give them a old smart TV with a TV without touch, and they say it's dated, right? Technologies are also differently consumed by each of those elements out there. Uh, so that becomes very, very important in terms of how adoption in education, healthcare is I think the fastest growing, uh, fastest adopting industry vertical during and post COVID will possibly be the healthcare, right? We've seen a lot of needs of human free and touch free interfaces with healthcare industry, and multiple areas we can see the need for assisted medicine, healthcare is becoming very important out there. Industrial manufacturing, whether it's field assist, expert assist, remote assist, remote diagnostics, cognitive command centers, control centers, all of those are becoming fairly important today. And those are, it's a both a need from the industry and technology availability. Both are marrying very well to create that path and pattern for us. Engineering side, AutoCADs and SolidWorks of that world. For a long time, they've been using visualization and 3D, but with the techniques that we're talking about here, the ability to scale that and democratize engineering will be far higher, right? You can look at remote collab, remote design, engineering aspects, and all of that fairly differently. Whether it's generative design that you see, many of those concepts start getting more and more real in the engineering side of it. Retail, try before you buy, is one important aspect. You can practically you can look at a fairly uh, practical cashierless store using all these technologies, right? Where you can walk into a store, buy what you want, and walk out. And a lot of the computer vision plus AR and context aware systems will all have a big role to play in terms of how we drive try before you buy, and navigation of products and personalized coupons out there. Marketing advertisement, second screen was a very famous concept in 2004-5 timeframes. Right, second screen marketing became very popular, but today we're seeing a lot more personalized ads. You are nearing a store, and AR can track you and map you, and start pushing different augmented information onto on your smartphone. Some of these are fairly real. Pokemon Go is a good example of what else can be done in that space out there. And emergency response, again, whether it is uh, having a phone and talking to somebody, or a walkie and talking to somebody, versus having a real wear, or a voice enabled hearable plus wearable from a AR perspective, can be far more effective in the way you can actually handle emergency responses out there, right? I think every sector, the B2B, B2C, B2B2C, all three sectors are fairly well mapped using these technologies, and driving impact out there. Again, I think the whether it's immersion at one end, scale at the other end, look at the type of hardware, type of environments that we're looking at, right? The whole space is fairly well populated today, right? Mobile AR, mobile VR, the console based AR, VR, MR, whether it's tethered, whether it's untethered, there are dedicated AR systems that are available out there, right? So the play is getting fairly crowded. The space is getting fairly crowded today, right? Again, hardware wise, platform wise, media wise, brand wise, and you know what? It is still getting started, right? The good part of it, what we're seeing at the industrial players versus the mobile versus dedicated models out here, tethered or untethered aspects. It is still yet to scale to that level of growth. And next 2 to 3 years, we'll see that explosion happening big time out there, right? Again, I think this is a very busy slide, but intent was to tell you that it's getting crowded slowly, right? There are a lot of new entrants. There are a lot of legacy players. There are a lot of new stacks getting created. There's a lot of new realignment of technology distribution happening there to create a fairly enterprise grade spread out here, right? again, very quickly, use case, engineering visualization. We looked at how you can, and this way you can look at a BIM perspective also, right? So somebody asked a question on building information modeling using Revit and some of the other platforms. If you can go back and design engineer any of your different parts of the BIM, right? Look at the wiring, ducting, piping, safety, the water, all of those designs getting created with the structural formats, and then you integrate the design in a holographic environment, and then look for design flaws. If your water safety versus electrical ducts are colliding, can I detect that in the BIM on a virtual holographic in room scale environment in advance and start correcting that using augmented reality environments, right? Correcting design way before you actually look at because manually putting it together is a fairly complex part, and that's one reason why you see many turnkey projects run at about 50% time overruns and 30% cost overruns, right? So some of these techniques, if you bring them together and put them together from a BIM perspective, you will see dramatic improvements in efficiencies of time creep, cost creep, effort creep, and all those aspects of that. Uh, Guided training and remote assist, very good example of what you can do out here. Uh, on an AR glass, what you could go back and you can get every parameter. If it's an IoT platform that's running at the back, I have an AR environment, AR platform running. If I can run an AI engine behind it and a computer vision and detect objects, imagine what we can do out there. I can tell you I mean, a gauge normally shows me the pressure there, but it shows me at the edge, right? What is happening behind it? We will also start getting demystified. So I will not make a decision about a breakdown or a failure or a condition-based monitoring based on what I see at the peripheral layer. I can use information data behind each of those elements to be able to make that decision and decide what is right, what is wrong, and what is the next best action I need to take. And that guided training and remote assist, guided training is more of the skill enablement part of it, but remote assist can actually be done delivered on job at site in real time with all the feeds coming back to us there, right? Scenario based trainings again very useful in terms of how you can actually look at industrial ecosystems. Typically, if you see the digital twin world at a physical asset and an ecosystem level, right, there are four layers typically in a digital twin. When you look at an ecosystem layer of a twin, and you're able to capture, contextualize, and process, hundreds of thousands of sensors, and bring that entire digital asset live, make it computable, make it correlatable from an engine perspective, you can then start looking at it differently, and you can then do scenario based simulations on that, right? And uh, there are I'll give you an example of looking at a blowout in an oil rig, right? In a typical blowout scenario in an oil rig, there are about uh, 16 signatures that you need to track in real time. You get 10 minutes to decide whether the rig is going to blow out or not. And that 10 minutes, you have to run about 1,000 different simulations and decide what is the next best action there. Many a times, the judgmental call is more intuitive, is more intuition based, right? I think, right? And we've seen that I think with some of the earlier blowouts that happened about 10 years back, right? The impact was huge. Ecosystem, even after 10 years, the impact is still felt out there, right? In terms of cost, the economical, environmental damages that were done there, right? So simulation and scenario-based activities, a very good way of using industrial VR and cave to be able to do all of those can be done under different environments there. Retail shopping, try whether it's you want to shop for super premium products, whether it's beauty in terms of dress, apparel, or the whole concepts of buying high value capital intensive cars, watches, jewelries, uh, or even grocery side of it. We've seen fairly useful nutritional elements being augmented onto your device as you pass by and telling you best offers, all of that. So you could fairly do in store, virtual, and online shopping way differently by using some of these AR, VR, or XR techniques right here, right? Very, very powerful use cases. I think with the pandemic scenario, nobody wanting to walk into a store, These are very, very high impact scenarios out there. Any questions? I'll take a pause here for a minute if there are any questions.
Yes, sir. So, sir, there is Shrishti who is asking that is Google Glass that debuted in 2014 an example of AR, VR, or MR, and why did it fail?
It was a little too early in the market, right? Technologies were not there, standards were not there. We're seeing as a service evolve over the period, right? So the last 5 years, 6 years, a lot of technology itself has transformed itself to create acceptability of that at low cost, at uh, at the edge. The whole concept of empowered edge. So it's the need is both. The technology had to evolve is one part, and the digital natives were one. If you ask anybody who's Gen X, Gen Y, they will probably not be excited so much about AR, VR. You'll have different perspectives coming from different people, right? But the digital
Right.
natives will have a different approach to it. They will think differently. They will accept it. They'll that you know what? In fact, I'll go the other extreme. They'll not engage with you if you're not XR enabled.
Okay. So, sir, I did not get it. That Google Glass was an AR platform, VR, or MR?
Google Glass was an AR platform, right?
Okay.
It was able to augment information for you, but I think the challenges there were network connectivity, bandwidth, wireless activities. So it was very lab. It was developed or built for a lab environment. Well, in the real world, there were many other challenges in 2014-15. Even in a 4G world, we don't see stable remote Wi-Fi activities.
Right.
So those are the constraints out there, and many others, obviously, that many technical aspects around the glass itself, which did not allow it to become successful, and Google had to withdraw it. But the similar ones now, if you look at glasses which are coming up now, Google is launching its new glass. Apple has its own AR glass, in the pipeline. We have RealWear today, which are very robust, very stable, very rugged, and they are both tethered and untethered in the way you can use them. So I think that it was more of it was. I think somebody had to do the first move and fail, so that all of us can
Right.
now pick it up and run with it now.
So it was ahead of time.
It
I,
was ahead of time.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, sir, Himangini Katara is also, she's mentioning that we can easily connect the real issue in very good manner using VR. So, I guess that is a statement she's sharing, like
Okay.
Srishti did, and she's also sharing that she almost had a heart attack watching a roller coaster ride on VR video.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No. So I think the only constraint with VR and is that you will not they're not very comfortable for majority of the people for beyond 10 minutes 20 minutes time frames. At 10
Right.
15 minutes, people who are adventurous can it'll start nauseating, it'll start giving you a little disorientation about 15 20 minutes, right? If there's a
Right.
medical condition, it'll be much before that. Maybe in about 3 to 5 minutes, people with medical conditions will start getting disoriented. But yeah, the whole technology has to evolve. The fact that your world is very constrained and you're physically in static but mentally moving, right, will confuse the brain and the body, and the dynamics will start
Right.
shifting. That is where the nausea feeling starts coming in. But that will get addressed. I mean, VR will take some more time, but AR is going to move much faster before that, because those constraints are uh, minimized or reduced in the AR world. It
In
is
AR.
still not easy. It is still not easy. It needs some practice, but it is not nauseating to that extent, or it's not nauseating at all. In fact, a lot of AR is uh, fairly real time, fairly comfortable.
Right. So should I take next question or
Sure,
we'll
sure.
move to the next section? So it was
The
from okay, ठीक है. So you
Can you
continue
go
with the
ahead? Go ahead. Let's
presentation.
let's take one more question. No problem.
Okay. So there is one question wherein they are asking that according to you, what are the problems or ideas that a startup aspirant can work on using AR or MR? So that is AR, VR, or MR.
So the question is about problems or where to focus.
Uh, the problems or ideas that the startup aspirant can address. and can work with AR, VR, MR?
Okay, so many of the use cases that we saw, and that's why I said, whether it is collaboration, whether it is expert assist, knowledge assist, or experience assist, all of those can can be replicated across any industry, right?
Right.
So you could do the problem statement can be basically remote assist or replacing a human to human connect with the AR to human connect, the human machine interface part of it with either a knowledge, a skill, or an experience being augmented back through the AR world or the MR world, right? And I gave you a very broad statement, but you could take it to any industry, whether it is health, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is services industry, whether it is transport and travel. Very good use case in transport and travel also that you can look at. So from a startup perspective, you could decide where you want to play, but uh, all your use cases centered around these three or four elements that we talked. Try before you buy, whether it's service or a product. Uh, so you could look
Right.
at it from that point of view. I think I'll not be able to get very specific unless I know what industry and what you're looking for. But you can play in the hardware, you can play in the platform, you can play in the content, you can play in the whole system integrated last mile from a deployment standpoint. The place is fairly open today. I don't think any of the existing players have captured more than 7 to 10% of the market share there, right? Whether it's India or global. So the battlefield is fairly open today.
Right. So if that person is online, I would request them that if they can elaborate on the sector you are wishing to work with, and or else there would be training or guidance needed, but for your consumer, but I guess can be pretty much applied to any sector as sir mentioned. Okay. So sir, let's continue. I
Okay,
have four more questions, and I'll take it up once you tell me.
sure. Okay, so we'll quickly cover this section. XR is becoming a lifestyle today, right? And I think that is where the whole concept of being able to look at XR differently, from now to the next 3 years, the next 5 years, right? And let's look at that, whether it's personas and maybe addressing the earlier question also, right? How consumers are likely to use AR. You can see that whole cycle out there, right? And each of those personas, whether you're at a buyer persona, your seller persona, or you're at the user persona, right? And how each of those segments will adapt and will allow you to leverage each of these in the lifestyle mode will be very very important, right? And every section, whether it's training, whether it is tri-band, looking at it from integration, looking at it from services, looking at it from exploration and discovery of a product, looking at it from an inspiration perspective, all of those aspects, the life cycle that you typically navigate through in a typical decision inspiration to buy decision cycle can be mapped fairly well. So you'll have it embedded, and some of these will be available out there. Student, if you look at XR from a student perspective, right? Uh, Classroom enabled, and we've seen Snapchats with AR in the past also very successful, right? You'll I don't think you'll be far away from actually using. In fact, some classrooms have used AR to project globe and elephants in the classroom during pandemic time. I don't know if you've seen some of those teachers projecting them there and using them to tell students what elephants are and what globe is, what galaxies are, right? You can see that fairly well becoming a embedded part of the student or academic space there. Retailing again, whether it is the deciding furniture stores, uh, again embedding back into your home design, interior designing aspects, embedded back into your the clothing aspects of it, right? From a visual retailing perspective, visual search, right? Any of you have tried the Google AR, where you can go to Google AR, do a 3D, and in your living room you can project a tiger, and the tiger can be fairly uh, photorealistic and blend back into your living room world, right? So you should try if you have not tried that. It's got quite a few elements there: tigers, there are cats, dogs, there are lions, there's dolphins, many of those elements, right? So visual search and augmenting visual search back into your physical world is again making XR a lifestyle for you today, right? That's exactly the parts out there, right? We just wanted to show you some of the other elements. So how to create? Let's briefly create it. Look at the creation part. We are almost over an hour now. Okay, and then we'll cover the industrial side of it, and I'll go into digital transformation briefly, and cover that part of it. Right. I'll probably skip a few slides as I go along now. I didn't they may only give you more details of what we're talking of here, but the framework, requirements to proofing to experience to integrate, and then being ready with the AR VR side of it. So if you look at the whole, and I'm taking one example of a tech stack here, right? But if you look at the hardware layer, the XR SDKs, becoming a very important factor. There are standardized SDKs, there are vendor-specific SDKs. You've got the AR foundation and the interaction toolkits, all the way into the application layer, right? Now, the XR subsystem, and some of your development or startups can either focus on some or all of these, right? But you can overlay this to any other tech stack out there, right? I'm using it fairly at an ecosystem layer thinking right now in terms of how each of those layers will play with each other, and how you're able to standardize whether you build it for a Windows XR, for a Magic Leap, for a Oculus, build it on a any of the other platforms out there using a SDK. You can go back and fairly well use the subsystems out there, whether it is meshing displays, face recognitions, different planes, tracking objects, tracking images, right? Uh, Using all of those, you can get into the interaction layer and design interactions, do AR foundations fairly well, and get into your the application layer fairly well out there, right? So broadly, this is where you need to think through. Because you need to probably put your thoughts in terms of what you want to do. But what is important is for you to understand each of these layers fairly well, right? Because if you miss out uh, the constraints of the near layer above what you're working on or below what you're working on, your ability to scale will start getting constrained as you go into production or pre-prod cycles of your startups, right? So think through this. My intention today is to just give you thoughts and open your mind to some of these things out here, right? You'll need to get into a little more detailed research from your side to understand the space well. And many of these are open standards, right? None of these are proprietary standards today. OpenXR, OpenAR, Web, OpenGL are all open standards for you, and you'll be able to get enough content and information. If I can make you aware of these interaction toolkits of the AR Foundation part, AR Core, AR Kit, right? And you can see how you can leverage all of those. It will give you a good base out there. Look at OpenXR itself, right? The basic APIs. XR space is there, XR instance is there, there's XR system ID is there. You've got XR actions, XR sessions, right? So these are all standards which are defined, and the ecosystem itself. If you see the before XR, the web was very complex, right? You had everybody talking to everybody else, and you're trying to have very customized. Your cost of build and cost of deploy was very high before OpenXR got defined, right? And sometime in 2017, and that's one of the reasons why Google Glass also earlier on failed, right? Because there were no standards. Cost of build and cost of implement was very high, right? And in last year, on not last year, the year, yeah, 2019 July, 1.0 was released, and Kronos Group made it uh, fairly portable for people to develop on these platforms, and that's one good sign of saying why we are ready for scale, right? And maybe after 2019, a lot of your effort will get optimized, at least. If not, it is still high content. The most of the factors are around cost today: content development, content rendering, content orchestration, right? But they will start getting, because then you build for one and play for many, right? That model will start evolving with OpenXR. But go through the Chronos standards, go through each of the standards if you're looking at a startup, and look at how you can actually align yourself to each of these. And so it's application interface or device plugin interface. Look at what and how you can actually run this out. You could look at some proprietary engines, and you'll need proprietary for some niche use cases, right? I'm not saying you'll not need it at all, but for 70 or 80% of the use cases out there, you can fairly stay on the open standards out there, right? Uh, Content creation platforms, again, whether it's 3D, engines, Unreal engines, or Cry engines, or Unity by platform itself, reality captures for the photogrammetry aspects. If you look at any of the other systems out there, Matterport, is again becoming very popular today. right? So you can use all of these, the whole Autodesk suite of products out there, right? So you've got so much to create content right now. Earlier, your content creation was very restrictive, very monolithic, if I can use in terms of build. Right now, you can actually go ahead and import pre-built components into your models into your environment and start uh, and fast forward some of your content creation activities. And content itself is fungible across different formats there. Interaction design is again a very important. This is a very important aspect. If you look at once you look at the content side of it, how you interact, what are your means of digital touch points, physical touch points, how those touch points will translate back into correlation with what you're trying to do. Can you do emotion gaze analysis around that? Can you do intent analysis around that? Can you predict what the customer is wanting to do and respond accordingly? Many of those IX aspects are and there are standard toolkits available again today, right? So interaction designing will also be uh, fairly modularized from a thinking and skill development perspective, right? Uh, okay, now we can look at the some of the elements. I'll quickly skip some of these things. You can actually go through them. We are some VR mockups. We looked at digital mockups, makeups, right? I'll probably take a few questions out here, and then we'll go to digital transformation and see how XR will transform that space. We can take a few questions if you want here.
Yes. So, sir, there is a question from Lee PUBG Gaming, and he or she is asking that will XR implementation give good ROI for companies who uses them now or in future? And cost of developing XR is high, right? And time consuming.
Yeah, so your ROI is always depending on how many users or how many what's the market development side of it, right? So look at the use case which can be fungible across different use cases, different markets, right? And there are different ways of doing it. I'll probably not be able to, uh, you know, the cost of delivery is based on how many people can consume it. I would put it there and design it for maximizing your user base. That will probably be the best way of looking at it for now, right? Because the cost is not going to come down overnight. Probably it's going to take because skill is a challenge, right? There's a lot of effort in India today to develop those skills at a college level, at education layers, right? But the creative side of engineering is different. There are very few people who can do the creative side of engineering very well, right? And getting engineers and creative to work together is a challenge. You'll have to plan that out well if you're looking at a startup, right? Because you have to make people work, you have to make the layer of skill work, then the technology, then the platform, and then the application layer, right? Because developing it is now not a one-man army, one man show. Developing AR, VR, MR will take you different skill sets coming across different dimensions of needs: domain side, UX side, IX side, content side, renderings, lightings, animations, right? Then the whole integration part of it, then 3D modeling. Everything needs to come together, right? Many of those are simplified today because you've got many of those open standards and open models available. But you will have to understand that 9 yards. It's a X-shaped or a T-shaped skill set that you need to have when you're trying to think of what to do there, and not just a tower-based thinking from a technology stack.
Yes. So if applied well and you have a market, then the ROI will eventually be good if we
Absolutely,
answer what he's asking. Yeah. So
it will be
next,
absolutely.
yes. So sir, Himangini is asking that can you please tell me how it's gonna use in a research area, like how ISRO can use it efficiently in making various projects and research.
So space is a huge, in fact, the whole uh, simulation, the whole aspect of. So if you look at space as an ecosystem, right, it's a uh, massively complex simulation scenarios, right? And whether it is designing some of these spaceships, uh, simulating their landings. Many of the simulations are already done using some of these techniques in a niche formats, right? But if you can, sort of look at it from how do you bring in maybe the wider crowdsourcing thinking using HR techniques out there, right? And a lot of the startups are working in that space today. The whole idea behind trying to promote startups, and I'm sure this one initiative that we're seeing right here, right, is where create those ecosystems, whether it is defense, whether it is space organizations, who can modularize the work and allow smaller startups to work in that space, crowdsource that entire stack, and then make it integrated for faster turnaround times, for faster stability, for scalability, for more accurate or more precise engineering will become there. So ISRO itself definitely uses all the simulation techniques and far more advanced versions of what we're talking of here. But there is scope for the the uh, the other side of XR to also play a big role out there. Was there a specific question from Himani? I mean, unless it's a very specific question, I just gave a generic answer. I didn't want to get into uh,
Yes.
what would this
So
new thing be.
Himangini, if you can just share the details, it'll be great. So sir can answer on that point itself. Meanwhile, I'll take up this question wherein so there is Malay is asking that what are the current practices which will be replaced with products and services using AR or VR in future?
Mm,
So what are the yeah,
can you repeat the question? What are the
yes. So what are the current practices which will be replaced with products or services using AR VR in the near future? So what market or what products or services will be replaced using augmented reality or virtual reality in near future?
Okay, I think that's a good question. See, this market does not exist, right? Because we've so far the post-industrial age and the IT age, we were looking at augmenting and analytics and data-centered activity, right? The whole XR uh, uh, today is moving from a, like we said earlier, hands-free to a human-free activity. So you are actually creating a fairly new uh, marketplace for yourself, right? If you look at 10 years back, we were talking of dematerialization, doing more with less, right? The whole concept of systems of record to systems of engagement, right? So many
Right.
of those concepts today are becoming real, and they're creating a new. You see, the conventional sites, form of industry is getting disrupted and disrupted very fast, right? So it's a new marketplace. It's a new. Am I replacing any product or a service? I don't think so, right? You're only making it more efficient, making it more effective, making it more green from a consumption perspective. Making so you're moving it to the bottom of the pyramid. The other way of looking at it is right. Earlier,
Right.
many of these OT skills needed people with 30 years experience with on the rig, on the factory, on the refinery, right? And they had to be super experts in that space. Now you're able to blend that back and moving that role to a fairly the tendencies move towards the lower end of the pyramid. You have uh, more not so ready people able to do those tasks. So you're actually
Yeah, the
reconfiguring the labor
accessibility.
landscape.
Yeah. It has become more accessible for even students who would want to pursue some field or sector as their career or profession eventually.
Correct. Correct. Right. So tomorrow, a fresher can come and get into a critical role without having to go through those. Most of the trainings was 6 years, 10 years before you actually took on those roles in the industry. Right. Those things will slowly start shifting.
So would that be actually good or a hindrance?
We don't have a choice today, right? Many of those people are retiring today. 30, 40 years
Right.
people on the rigs are retiring today. And new people have to come in and manage the same complexity with no experience. You have to augment their experience and you have to enable them to be able to manage those complex systems. Otherwise, there can be fatal accidents that can happen, which can be far, far more dangerous for us. So technology now is becoming a need, and that's why it's coming to the front. Right today, if you look at most industries today are rebranding themselves as the world's largest retailer says that we are a tech platform company, and the largest banker in the world today is a technology company, right? So it is becoming a need because digital natives coming in are changing the dynamics of the whole concept of Uberization as a service thinking. The way social economies, experience economies are transforming things. So I don't think we have a choice today. Not about being good or bad. Uh, population is exploding, the natural resources are not going to explode at the same rate. There's always going to be a gap between what green becomes very important. Carbon neutral thinking is very, very critical from an environment standpoint. You'll have to blend all of those back. It's a fairly complex scenario from a governance standpoint, from a controllership standpoint, but that's the only way to do it. I don't think there's any other way of doing it.
Yeah. So in the end, it's like we are making the ends meet. That there would be a cost to it, but that is unavoidable if we say so.
Correct. Correct. That's right.
Uh, yes. So will you like shall I take one more question?
Sure.
Yeah. So here Lee is again asking says so anyone applied for accelerator startup contest? How will we know if we are selected? Last date 17. Okay. So if it is regarding Accelerate Bharat, it is an accelerator program. And if you are selected, you will get a communication from our end. You will get the emails and all the materials regarding it. So the last date, if you're working on any startup idea in the mentioned sectors and with the technologies, so you can apply for Accelerate Bharat. There is no registration fee to it, and if selected you'll get a communication from our end, and for the helpline you can use the number mentioned on our website, and that is our office number, and one of us should be there to answer you. Okay. Can you give me a small startup idea in the VR technology? Dude RJ is asking.
So no, what startup idea in the VR technology? Okay.
Yeah, so if the person wants to start a startup with VR technology, might have background into it, but is asking for a startup idea if you have any.
See, a lot of VR will be restrict gaming side of it. I I I would find it difficult to look at VR from a at least the head mounted VR. There's a lot of room scale VR thinking, but that's capital intensive, right? A typical holographic in the room scale holographic or a room scale industrial VR would be fairly different, right? But if it's a startup and you want to do only in VR, then it is fairly on the gaming side, right? But if you're looking at AR, you can look at many other areas. If you're looking at MR, you could look at many other aspects, and we'll talk some of those as I go along now, right? Maybe you can pick up some thoughts. I think next few slides will be the enterprise side of it. I've not covered the gaming side of it at all because gaming side I think is a fairly well established footprint for people, right? I'll spend some thoughts on how I see this world from the industrial enterprise side in the next 5 6 slides, right? And it'll get you can pick up some thoughts and ideas because uh, that's the best way for you to look at it. For me to, it's a very one-on-one question. I don't think I can give you a generic answer saying what's a good startup. That's $1 million question.
Yes, sir. So you can continue with the presentation, and I'll take note of the other questions
Sure.
that
Okay.
come along.
Okay. Right. So maybe I'll take another 15 minutes. I'll wrap it up from my side in 15 minutes. Then if the questions we can continue for some more time. But okay. So look at a few things out here, right? What is and we'll see a few more technologies when we started on earlier. The team mentioned about different emerging technologies that are driving up there, right? So industry conversions become very important. You're seeing the boundaries between front office, middle office, back office is dissolving. You can see a very strong footprint of multiple industries coming together to drive efficiencies, to drive uh, survival, to drive growth, to drive average revenue per customers, and all of that, right? A bank working with retail working with manufacturing, they're all fairly fungible in terms of processes, KPIs, and activities, right? We spoke of observability, right? Digital age architecture is all about composable apps, composable businesses itself, which is what the industry conversion is all about, right? So that is an important, the whole concept of design for scale, low latency, high volume, right? The microservices, Kubernetes platforms, multi-cloud thinking becomes important, right? Because that's where your scale and the cost of build and cost of delivery will start reducing. Digital age upskilling is important. I think we've come across that concept multiple times in the last 1 hour. We've looked at people that have to do things which they're not familiar, which are not intuitive, which are not natural, which are not uh, human behavior by design. Right? You're looking at augmenting AI, augmenting reality. You're looking at virtualizing environments, and these are very fuzzy elements, very difficult for people to sort of uh, engage and deliver and perform in those environments. So that upskilling becomes very important. And how do you upskill at the core along with the virtualized world and blend both those for people to be more productive, more effective, and reduce risk and reduce improve safety aspects of it. So that's an important part. The fourth dimension of transformation effective is the IT/OT part, where you converge the operations technology and information technology and blend the way we can actually create value and industrialize XR as we go along, right? And each of these technology stacks, look at AI, look at robotics, look at blockchain, look at IoT, whether it's 3D printing, 5G. See, all of these are changing and changing very fast. They're transforming. They're moving from concept to reality in a matter of 6 to 12 to 18 months, right? And they're getting into POC to production in far shorter cycles today, right? And many of those or all of those will converge to get consumed at the edge using any of the XR stacks, right? And this is a very important thinking, right? Because whether you start with AI, blend it back with AR, and you can deliver efficiencies. Robotics with AR, you can do robo ops, you can do AI ops, robo ops. Blockchain, you can do digitized trust, and you can do XR transactions a lot more uh, with safety, with accuracy, with data privacy aspects managed well out there. IoT plus AR, you can practically control factories and engines and equipments and machinery remotely using these techniques. 3D printing plus AR, you can actually monitor, govern, and manufacture anywhere, anytime, anyhow. That concept will become very powerful. And then 5G with XR, and many of these will help you deliver uh, high density related aspects remotely, 4K res, 8K res, 6K res content at the edge, and you're able to do slicing for bandwidth management and effective utilization of all of those 5G concepts at the edge. So effectively, if you can think of XR as a encapsulating factor across all of these tech stacks, and the last mile of any of these technologies when they drive value will be XR, and that I'm not being too far away from reality by making that statement today, right? Because in some form, you'll use XR techniques. It may be in absolute form or it may be in concept layer, but you'll need that to create the empowered edge and translate that back into an interaction, into an experience, or into a transaction for us at the edge, right? So that is one. We've looked at this earlier, but Industry 4.0, retail, defense, the whole aspects of what we can do in simulation training there, smart cities, the whole concept of Internet of Skills and Internet of Experiences, right? These are all transformational industries and industry views coming up, and these are driven by larger ecosystems today. It's not bottom up. It is all coming top down, right? And that's where I believe many of these concepts will leverage XR very strongly across each of these spaces out there, right? Computability is becoming far more effective, uh, cost effective, far more efficient, and can be done anywhere, anytime. With edge computing, you're able to transform all of that to the edge also with complex data structures there, right? Uh, Powerful concept for us. I can skip this there. Uh, Look at it. Each of those can be mapped differently. OpenXR, again, a view of what we looked at. I'm looking at summarizing some of these things, but let's spend a few minutes on this, right? Because some elements, and I'm putting only key highlights out here. But what are the skills required? If you're looking at it from a startup perspective, right? Uh, the type of skills required between what the industry needed up until now to what will be needed now going forward in digitally transformed environment. So the concept of going digital and being digital, right? Uh, so far, we were trying to go digital, right? And technology was going way ahead of the curve, and industry was trying to follow, right? Now, in the new world, in being digital, technology is now trying to trail, right? Because industry is putting pressure on technology for delivering things which are not tried and tested, and we have to move fast in terms of adoption. That blend of being digital, going digital, and how do you drive digital differently, right? And technology being right at the forefront and trying to enable each of these things out there, right? Now, some of these elements, the softer side of it, innovation thinking, creative visioning, critical thinking, the whole aspects of problem solving, empathy, collaboration, uh, media literacy, ability to you know synchronize and correlate and contextualize uh, multiple forms of these technologies will be an important skill from a thought leadership standpoint, right? And then you bridge that gap of technology itself. You connect it back with the digitally experienceable concepts like spaces, space design, concept designs. Look at uh, uh, the whole teachable machines, right? Machine learning versus teachable machines. You're moving away from AI everywhere, where looking at uh, so AI itself has evolved. It's not an AI session, but if you look at transfer learning, model compressions, the whole aspect of explainability part of it, and bringing in the decision making or trust in AI, a lot of those will start having an impact out there, right? So you'll add is smartness and simplification both, right? In fact, on the space world, there was one nice image I'd seen some time back, right, where spaceships in 60s and 70s, there were hundreds of different spaces on your dashboard, and you were like you needed to really live that world to control that. Whereas the spaceships of the 2020s, there are just three panels there and digital touch panels, right? You can It's a fairly simplified world, from a landscape of hundreds of different controllable objects to three touch panels, and everything software defined out there, right? So simplification becomes very important aspect of how the whole smartness and simplicity gets added out there, right? Anything anywhere experienceable is very important aspect. Again, another view of how intelligent, immersive, and inventive we can get. From a TechCrunch perspective, we can see that education, manufacturing, different percentages of how that market share is going to get evolved. Some startup ideas can come for some of you from here itself. Uh, I will play this brief video, and then I think I can take more questions. This is some of the digital twins and some of the elements that we've worked at Wipro. Right, a very high level view. I'm not getting into details of that, but just get you a glimpse of how we use VR tech stacks to do different stuffs within the industry spaces for us here. Okay, I think I'll pause here, and we can take some questions as we go along. I can't hear you now. You're muted, I think.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
So if there are any other questions, you guys can post it now in the comments box on whatever platforms you have joined us with. So yes, Himangini just mentioned that she's working on a project about planet atmosphere, and so that is why she had asked the question. It was in a generic form that she was asking. Yes,
Okay, but
the video.
she
Yes,
doesn't work for ISRO, right?
Himangini, do you work for ISRO? If you are still around, please reply. So
That's okay. We'll take it offline.
yes. There are. I'll wait for 2 more minutes. If people have other questions, I can take it up here. And Yes, the video is going to stay on the GeoSec YouTube channel. It'll be there. Yes. I'll just check, sir, if there are any other questions that were mentioned previously as well. Okay, so in India, which companies are leaders of these technologies?
So there's a lot of hardware development happening in India today, right? There are a lot of locally developed MR headsets getting launched. Uh, so that's an interesting move because the content side of it, almost all the top players have their base in India, and from a system integration perspective, I think the industrial side of it, you have all our leading SIs having strong practices and platforms and services being developed out here. I think India will take a lead. There's a lot of work happening both at a government level because we're trying to see how we can scale skill augmentation across manufacturing, migrant workers. There is work that we're looking at for democratizing or bottom of the pyramid enablement from AR perspective, whether it's farming, agriculture, many of those use cases. There's a huge opportunity out there. Indian companies are slowly starting to take interest in this space. Uh, it was earlier only the large corporates. Now quite a few startups are there. A lot of uh, venture capitalists have started, showing interest in this space. So in India will take fairly strong lead on AR VR, at least AR for sure, right? Uh, AR and
Right.
MR will pick steam immediately.
Himangini works for the Physical Research Laboratory. So,
Okay. So if you don't have the uh, space satellite technologies available, then the way you do some of the simulations will change. Probably it needs a more detailed understanding, Himangini. Maybe we can connect offline. It'd be interesting to know what you're doing and see if we can give you some thoughts on that. But we can do it offline, right? Because in a generic manner, planet atmosphere and okay, right? So if you have that equipment in the research laboratory, then that would be interesting, right? Because then like a cave, like a if you're looking at planet atmosphere, different layers of the atmosphere, how those atmospheric physical attributes, and how do you bring all of that together and then decide what you're trying to do out there. So the launch aspects, the design of launch aspects, the we'll have to look at some of those and see how. But okay, let me put it like this: a lot of industrial VR can help you simulate and create different scenarios if you have each of those digital twins mapped up, and you're able to go back and create variables around each of those parameters and simulate what you're trying to do out there, right? There is definitely scope, and I think standard SolidWorks engines or AutoCAD environments, or what we can do with a fully immersive room scale VR like Cave and all of that, using platforms like TechWiz. There are a lot of stuff you can do. But you know what? If you go back and look at how ISRO does it, ISRO is far more advanced in each of these concepts and technologies. Right? Might be good for you to also map and look at that.
right. So Himangini sir has answered the question, but if you have any further question or need to discuss this, you can drop us an email on contact@geosec.edu.in, and we'll pass it on to sir and get back to you on that. So moving on, the next question is from Shweta, and she's asking that does regular practice on VR visuals remove the medical conditions like nausea?
Mm, it'll not remove, but maybe it'll improve your tolerance levels. Right? Maybe you can tolerate it for a little longer time. Currently, it is a physical attribute that is a condition out there. Technology has to improve and readjust and realign in the VR world. It's probably a few years away from getting to that level of maturity.
Won't it
Age matters.
aggravate the same? Won't it aggravate the people who have nausea initially
It
if they
will,
are
but
exposed to it?
if there's a physical condition in the person using it, then it will only aggravate it. That's true. Right? But if you're a
Okay.
normal digital native, then if you practice it for some time, maybe you can live that world a little longer. Right? But I've not heard of. I know people. I know one of startups from Bangalore. I know he works for almost an hour hour and a half, 2 hours on a VR world when he's trying to test his product, right? I don't have the courage to do that.
So that does make sense, but it won't be possible for everyone, or not
It won't be
even
possible.
the 10 or 20% of the audience.
Yeah,
So,
difficult to generalize, but yeah, I agree with you.
so next question is from SK Rabiul. I'm sorry if I'm taking your name wrong. So he's asking that how much impact will AR create on the healthcare sector?
See, if I look at it percentage wise, healthcare is getting drastically uh, impacted by XR techs actually, right? All the way from remote assisted surgeries, which are in cave and virtual VR worlds, industrial room scale VR worlds, to handling equipments, servicing equipments, training people, diagnosing. Many of those elements are fairly well. The demand is faster than the supply today from a healthcare sector standpoint. So impact is going to be definitely very high. Healthcare needs AR far more mature and advanced than what industry is. Right, we're trying to move towards that rapidly now.
Right. So Yaksh Thakkar is asking that can we relate computer vision with AR? Is it the future with AR?
Yes, it is. Right, marker and markerless were two concepts in AR, but computer vision will help you do much more modular, much more granular work with AR. And as compute increases, if you can do untethered high compute on a AR, you'll definitely be able to blend both those very well. But that's the way to go.
So yes, I guess we have pretty much covered all the questions. A few about AR, VR, what are those, what are the basic differences is what we have already answered. And yes, Hibangini is saying that it's outer atmosphere like temperature, humidity. It's about that outer atmosphere, temperature, humidity, etc. And she's thanking you for the knowledge and will connect with
Sure. No, it'll be interesting for us to also know, Himangini, what you do there. Happy to connect with you later on that.
you. So, sir, I'm sorry we have already taken more of your time and we are already past 6:30. So I would request you to give us the concluding comments and then I can shut the session for today if there are no new questions.
No, it was nice. I enjoyed talking to all of you. It's a topic very close to our heart today, and I'm sure India as a country will leverage and benefit a lot. Uh, one the best thing I could personally get from this is if one of you make a startup and make it big in the next 3 to 5 years. That will be powerful. That will be interesting, right? But thank you for giving me this opportunity. Appreciate you having invited me to do this talk.
Sir, it was our pleasure having you here. The session was really insightful and wonderful. And not, I guess the audience was not as aware about the details or the advancements in the technology that you have explained. So yes, it was really good having you here. And I got to learn personally a lot. And I'm going to search about a few words that I have just mentioned during your session. I just noted them down. So it was really good of you to give us this time and share this knowledge with us. And we are looking forward to being connected and having you on board for future sessions as well.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And to the audience, thank you so much for joining in. And the feedback link for the session will be shared uh, on the platform in a minute. And we'll also be sharing it, flashing it on the screen. So I request you all to. Sir, can I take one last question? I'm sorry, I missed this. Uh, uh, Dude RJ is asking that Qualcomm Snapdragon launched a Cloud XR today. What's your opinion about it?
So I need to still get into the details from that perspective. But cloud and cloud XR with the multi-cloud strategy and the trend that we're talking of, that's the way to go. I think that is where the web AR, web XR with Snapdragons will help us to scale. That's the scale part. That's definitely one transformation. And if we're seeing a lot of that pattern happen over the last couple of weeks, we'll see many of those coming up now and driving much higher impact. I think that's the way to go. I feel I believe that we will start seeing much wider adoption of it as we go along.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining in. And I'll connect with you offline. And
Sure.
I would like to thank everyone who has joined us today. The feedback links are in your comments box. You can take it from there. And on filling this feedback form, the certificate will, will reach you on the registered email ID in a week's time. So, thank you so much for joining in. And I would also like to tell you guys uh, to keep connected on Facebook, YouTube, and our Instagram page, because we have a few more sessions on AI and uh, things planned in the coming week. So I'll keep you posted. We have the next session on the 12th of November, and the details of the same will be shared with you on the email and on our social media pages. So request you all to be updated for the upcoming sessions. And for Accelerate Bharat, you can visit our website and visit www.gusec.edu.in/AB for the Accelerate Bharat details. And if you have a startup in the sectors mentioned or using the technologies, and if you fall in the criteria, you can apply for the same, and we'll get back to you with the communication. And I'd like to thank Pravin sir again for his time. And I'll take you guys, I'll take leave from you guys, and I'll see you on 12th.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so for
Bye
joining
bye.
in.
Bye.
Bye.